Hi, Andy here. You're listening to part 2 of my conversation with Doctors Dennis and Michelle Reina on the art of trust building. In part 1, we explored why trust matters more than ever. And today, in this episode, we get practical. So let's get cracking. Hello and welcome to Sticky from the Inside, the podcast that explores how to build stickier, competition-smashing, consistently successful organisations from the inside out. I'm your host, Andy Gorham, and I'm on a mission to help you turn the lights on behind the eyes of your people, light the fires within them, and help more of us lead successful, fulfilling work lives. This podcast is for anyone who believes that's worth going after and who's curious about what really drives people, culture and performance. Each episode, we dive into the ideas and conversations that help create what I call stickier businesses, places where people thrive and love to work and where customers stay, recommend you and love what you do and why you do it. So, if you want to take the tricky out of being sticky, listen on. Previously on Sticky from the Inside, Dennis and Michelle Reina are the authors of Trust and Betrayal in the Workplace and the new book, The Art of Trust Building, and are widely, and I mean wildly recognised as pioneers in this space, focused not just on what trust is, but what it actually looks like in practice between us. And recently, they've been part of conversations with some incredibly senior leaders around the globe, hearing firsthand about the pace of change, the constant disruption and the evolving role of AI and what all of that is doing to trust between people.
So what Dennis and I are noticed that's rising to the top is this growing awareness among leaders that in order to grow our business, we have got to help our people grow as human beings. And they're recognizing how essential it is there to be attention to human connection, and that requires a focused intention around trust.
90% of the ways that trusts are broken, it's not the big, bad, dark, nasty betrayals. They're the minor, unintentional accumulation of minor things. Trust building is a transformative process that involves intentional process of cultivating, strengthening, and sustaining trust through deliberate actions, authentic communication, and shared vulnerability. You have to earn trust. Trust is earned step by step, moment by moment, every interaction, and it's a daily discipline.
I am a simple person, which is why I think I would love to move on to what I consider to be a really practical lens to explain trust that you have in the book around the 3 C's associated with trust, around character, around communication, around capability. Firstly, why that model? Where has it really come from? When did you land on it? And can you unpack it for us? Sure. And just sort of how it all works together?
Yeah, so I'll take a crack at that. When we first started the work and the research, first I literally did my doctoral dissertation on the impact of trust in work teams. Mm-hmm. And I learned a lot there after 7 years and getting my master's and our doctorates. But what I realized is there was so much more to learn. And when we started to talk with leaders and we started to, we literally interviewed 768 leaders in 19 different industries over a 4-year period for this first book on trust and betrayal in the workplace. And we ended up seeing that there were certain patterns, because we would ask people what their definition of trust was. Well, immediately they would go into betrayal. And then once we were able to get them back into, telling us how they got betrayed, etc., once we were able to steer them back into what the question originally was, we found that these three buckets came into trust of character. We do what we say we're going to do. And that became the starting point. And it's the starting point of any relationship, personally, professionally, at, business wise, etc. Do people do what they say they're going to do? Do they honor their commitments? Do they, first of all, are they clear on their intentions and their expectations?
Mm-hmm.
And do they deliver as promised? And are they consistent in their behavior? Okay. So those were the behaviors that we found that correlated to that dimension of trust. And then we looked at, because literally, if you ask 10 different people, they're going to give you 10 different definitions of trust. Oh, well, trust is honesty. No, trust is delivering as promised. No, trust is acknowledging the skill. Well, the truth is, it's all of those things. It's all three dimensions. So trusted communication is how we speak with one another. Are we transparent? Are we open and honest? And, do we share information that people need to know to do their jobs? And do we speak truthfully? And do we admit mistakes? And is it even safe enough to admit mistakes? In low trust environments, it's rarely safe enough to admit versus a high trust one. And do we listen to one another and give each other honest and objective feedback to help them literally learn and grow? And then, of course, trust of capability is the third dimension, is how we acknowledge and leverage the skills of one another in service to our customers and our clients, or those who we are charged to serve. And do we have the skills that are needed to do that? And are we able to make decisions, or do they have to be passed up, to the boss man, whatever? And do we involve one another in the decisions that affect their jobs and their lives? And do we help people learn and grow? So the essences, those three are the dimensions of trust. And we found that they're interrelated. People often ask us, well, can you have one without the other? Yes, but not for long.
Yeah.
Because if one is missing, when somebody says, I don't trust you, what does that mean? Does that mean my character, which is like, whoa? Or does that mean how we speak with one another and what I'm saying and sharing information? Or is that my capability? Capability is the easiest one because you can teach that. You can help people learn and grow into that one. The trust of character, that's the starting point. And the reason why it's the starting point is because that's where it all begins. That's where the relationship begins.
Andy, taking a step backwards, I'm going to kind of step back a little bit into the research that Dennis was talking about, because there's something that was very profound during that period of time. So, we get these doctoral dissertations and we both studied trust within them, but we had more questions than answers. So over a 4-year period of time, we did extensive research, interviews and focus groups, et cetera, et
This
cetera.
was after our doctorate research.
Yeah. So what we found, Andy, is that trust is extremely complex.
Yes.
It is emotionally provocative. And as Dennis mentioned, it means different things to different people. But throughout the research and the analysis and the findings and the themes and the patterns, we did discover those three elements of trust that we gave language to: trust of character, trust of communication, trust of capability. But what we learned through that research is what people most needed was some common handlebars. So those three dimensions of trust are intended to give us a tool and a reference point to raise our awareness.
Yeah.
The three dimensions of trust give us a common language and a shared understanding to do something very important, which is to talk about trust-related issues constructively. Because through that dialogue and coming to more fully understand those three dimensions and their behaviors, we then can take action
Yeah.
to grow and develop to strengthen trust, but to maintain it and to sustain it. So the three dimensions of trust give that meaning in that language, and they give the behavioral framework that we can talk and we can act. The key is consistently. When we're practicing those three dimensions and their behaviors consistently, we are growing in trust. Today in our world, trust of character is something that needs to be revisited again and again and again because expectations are constantly changing.
Yeah, sure.
What's needed is shifting and changing. So those behaviors, keeping them front and center, help people arrive at meaning. Trust of communication. Oh my goodness. We all need to be able to talk about, mistakes that we're making, things where we're tripping up, telling the truth about our vulnerabilities and areas that, we're wrestling, et cetera, et cetera. But the point I wanted to make for those who tune in and have the benefit to listen to our conversation is the three dimensions give us the behavioral blueprint,
Yeah.
and they give us that framework to raise our awareness, to talk with one another, and to help one another take action.
And that's what I really love about it, because for me, there's the framework coupled with consistency, which then breeds habit, right? And
Yes, yes,
we need the habit
yes,
to kind of stick so that we can move some stuff on. And I think that for me, the bit that connected for me reading the book was that previously, probably a long time ago, one of the first ways I was introduced to trust, like a lot of people, was with something as simple as the trust equation, and
yeah,
the simple sort of credibility, reliability, intimacy over
yeah,
self-interest, right? But when you think about that, that's great. Okay, I suppose that's where it comes from, maybe, or an element where it comes from, but how? And I think this is where the three C's and being
yeah,
really quite practical and
yes,
specific about, hey, these are the behaviors that will accentuate character, will breed decent communication,
yes,
will grow capability in yourself and others. And I think that self and others is such a common theme coming through here.
yes,
That's why I really like the practical nature of it, because it's breaking it down into simple, observable, repeatable behaviors.
yes. I was taking back to that excitement you and I had a
Mm,
couple of weeks ago when we had that wonderful chat and we got so excited about this part. What I experienced from you is that you began to see, this part about it becomes habit.
yeah,
It becomes habit. And as it becomes habit, what that means is that language of those three dimensions, those behaviors that bring those three dimensions to life are not conceptual, they're actionable, they're practical, and so when they're habit forming, they just become a part of our life, right, Andy? And you and I had a really fun conversation about, oh my gosh, expectations. Maybe we need to manage our expectations when we're going on a holiday. You were getting ready to go on a
oh, no.
holiday. So how did you manage that one?
Yeah, badly, Michelle,
I,
badly.
I actually, I actually had I have a quick story about that.
Yeah,
So years ago, we would all go on a family vacation, and what was interesting was my mother at the time had an idea of, oh, we're going to have every meal together. It's just like old time. I come from a family of seven, so there was a lot of mouths, and she was saying, oh, I get to cook and everything, and we're going to eat every meal together, and we're going to do everything together. And so I said, I think we need to get our expectations clear here. And I literally brought a flip chart on vacation and a marker. And I said, okay, mom, that was, your expectations are such. Now let's go down the line and let's capture every single one person's expectation. My older brother, my younger brother, my sisters, whatever, they were all literally different. And I mean, what do you mean about every meal together and doing everything? Are you, and we have a big family, right? But you know what? We mapped out the items and the areas, the items that we would do together and those that we would have apart. And that was the best family vacation. We went to the Outer Banks actually that summer. And that was the best family vacation we've ever had.
Brilliant.
Because, we were clear that, okay, so-and-so is going off here today, or who wants to go boating, or who wants to go fishing. And it was clear rather than everybody trying to do everything, like my mother at all no, it wasn't going to happen.
As humans, we function great with direction and certainty, right?
Yeah.
Most of us aren't great with vagueness and wobbliness, some better than others, but having a clearer picture, but also having the conditions to be able to have that conversation. As a leader, the mum, whoever, the guy with the flip chart on holiday. I mean, let's not go into that in too much detail, Dennis, right? But that person responsible for creating the conditions to have a conversation, to get
Right.
into some stuff. That's the
the
important stuff,
clarity.
right? Yeah.
And the clarity, absolutely. And to give people a starting point in this book,
Yeah.
we literally offer a starting point. We offer a free assessment. The individual trust scale comes with the book, okay? And it literally helps people have a starting point to measure those 3 dimensions on how they are practicing on a habit or a habitual level. How are they practicing those each and every day? Because as we know, trust building is a daily discipline.
Absolutely. Well, I know. I mean, I've taken the test. I've taken the test,
Yeah,
and I think I did pretty good. But I'm in the third category. I'm in practicing. I'm not in expanding. But I found it a really interesting test, and what I wanted to talk to you guys about, and this links, I get back full circle to maybe our exchange of the day on LinkedIn, Dennis. We were connecting on Joe Coxill's post around the summit that she was at, and the question that was coming up from that audience at the time about, look, we recognise trust is important. Yes, through internal communication is really important, but also through actions and leadership, and it's a critical, fundamental layer of building a successful culture. But how do we manage it? How do we measure it?
Yeah.
And this is a question that was coming up time and time again. And I've sort of said to people on LinkedIn, well, I'm talking to the guys who know how to do that. And that's you guys. So just talk us through that assessment and the difference between the individual stuff and how it works in organizations, and what the results that you find from your assessment.
Well, I love that question. We began. So this is actually an interesting little story, Andy. Over 30 years ago, and it's a story of how a moment in time,
Mm.
time can change the trajectory of time.
Mhm.
So I'm going back over 30 years ago when Dennis and I, were coming out of that 4-year period of rigorous research. And as an outgrowth of that research, we created a model that's called the trust and betrayal model. It's a multifaceted model of trust. And one facet of it is the 3 dimensions. So we were working with a group of of executives. It was a global team, and we were doing a strategy session. And during that period of time, we put up on the wall a flip chart paper. So Andy, I hope you won't think less of me, but I want you to know that at that time, PowerPoint was like brand new in the world. It was like we were all not using PowerPoint. We were doing overhead slides,
Mate,
flip
listen.
charts.
I know I look so very young, but I was an overhead projector guy at the start as well. Don't you worry about that.
So, so we're in a room with these group of senior leaders, and we have a flip chart, and we've got these 3 dimensions, the different colors, behaviors, all that kind of stuff. We're having just really great dialogue about it. Our first book hadn't even come out yet. And then during a break, the classic, everybody's hanging around the dessert bar, the coffee, drinking, chatting. And this one SVP was getting really into the work. And so we were all, kind of doing stuff. And he said, could you guys measure this? If there's any way you could measure this, oh my God, this would be so helpful for teams.
Mm.
So we hadn't even thought about that. Yeah. Well, we went right back to work. And long story short, 6 months later, we had developed our very first assessment. So we actually have created a suite. We have an assessment that measures trust within teams,
Mhm.
a 360 that helps leaders measure their own trustworthiness, and then an assessment that measures trust within organizations. So over the years, what these assessments have done is given teams and leaders a starting point. It takes those three dimensions of trust, but it helps us to really know, how are we practicing them today? Where are we the most consistent today? Where are we a little bit vulnerable? Where do we struggle? The value of that is it helps people to individually and collectively focus, kind of focus and hone in on where do we have the greatest opportunity. Now, trust building is judgment free. So this is not evaluative. There's no judgment on where are you good or where are you bad and where are you strong and where are you weak. No, it's just, where are you at?
Mm.
What are you doing already that is contributing to high trust? And where do we struggle? Where do we struggle? Because when trust is a little bit more compromised, it's a struggle point. But the beautiful thing about having data, it gives us objectivity, it gives us a starting point. We can focus our attention intentionally.
Mm.
So, with the benefit of those 30 plus years and the experience of seeing the shifts that has contributed, the difference that it's made, the business results it's generated, Dennis and I, when we were working on the art of trust building, we said, how can we bring this to the reader?
Mm.
Because we want this book to be practical. We want this book to be actionable. We wrote it to give people handlebars. We wrote it to give them actionable, practical steps they can take. We said to each other, how can we help them focus? And we thought, let's bring in a self assessment. So we drew upon all that research and we created the individual trust scale. And we invite people, we hope people will take it right out of the starting gate like you did.
Yeah.
So, because I remember when we got together, you said, "Hi, Michelle. Hi, Andy." We had a really great, we were like 3 minutes in. I took the self assessment. I'm practicing. Da 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 da.
Yeah, I'm so needy. I just needed to sort of like show that I did take interest in what you'd sent me. I think it's a fascinating assessment, actually. It really does make you think. And I think this is the thing for organizations. It's a start of a conversation. It's the start of a conversation that may have been taken for granted or pushed to a side or have no worth. And for me, it's akin to the sort of Dr. Amy Edmondson's work on like psychological safety, right? That whole fearless organization assessment, it's starting conversations about creating the right environments, right? And that's how
Yeah.
people can move forward. I think your assessment is exactly the same place here. So I was really excited yesterday when that LinkedIn thing popped off. And I'm saying yesterday, this is going live in like 2 weeks, but a couple of weeks ago, guys, or whatever it was. How do we measure trust? Well, we're talking to the guys right now who are
Mhm.
doing it, and I'd love if you can to share some insights or a story of an organization that's used the assessment and what's happened. Like, have you got a really lovely case study of an organization that's gone through that assessment and then gone, wow, we've seen some cool things that we need to change and how they've gone about kind of making improvements and what's been the end game?
Before we answer that question, I just wanted to point out that the suite of assessments, Andy,
Yeah.
we literally now have 5 that measure at the individual, the leader 360, the team, organization. We even have a customer trust scale. They have gone through years and years of rigorous testing, research, and practice. They are statistically valid and reliable. So these aren't just random questions that we
Sure.
thought of. These have been tested again and again and again, and have been, stood the, the test of time, but also the tests of our statisticians.
Yeah.
Literally, the first statistician that we had was Dr. Ray Newton, who was our research faculty in Santa Barbara. And he was our research faculty until he retired a number of years. And then we have another statistician, Harvard trained one in the Boston area. Anyway, so they've gone through a lot of testing and retesting to really make sure that these were measuring exactly what they were purported to measure. And in fact, our statisticians even said, I am so amazed at how correlated your questions are with one another, and that they literally measure the very thing that we're measuring, whether it be at the individual, team, leadership, trust, et cetera, et cetera. And, to the point about the individual trust scale, while it takes 5 minutes, right, Andy,
Yeah, it doesn't take long at all. No.
you get a very robust 11, 12-page feedback report that not only gives you a sense and explains each and every one of the behaviors of where you're at, but also gives you very forward-thinking coaching tips to take you to that next level.
And it's no surprise to me. I'm talking to two doctors. I'm no surprise to me that there's loads of rigor behind this sort of stuff. It's not like I'm talking to two Johnny come ladies on the street going, hey, I've got an idea about trust. What do you reckon? I've written it on the back of this fag packet. Let's do it. I perhaps take this for granted, right? But having read the book, having taken the test, I can see the amount of diligence and rigor that's through there, which is why I think it's a great thing. And I'm so delighted you're on here talking about it, because I can see the sort of conversations that will have to pop up in organizations if you go through that sort of testing, because the questions that are being asked, the responses and feedback that you get from it cannot help but to stimulate for either in a great way to validate what we're doing. Let's do more of that. Because I think sometimes the validation stuff is missed and forgotten. We're so focused on the things that are missing. But then it also will highlight areas for development, right?
Yes.
I think, Andy, and then I want to come back to your question, which I thought was a brilliant, brilliant question, is it for democide an integrity issue. We can't just research and write and teach and advise and support and coach and consult trust. We actually have to live it ourselves.
Of course.
And so if we're bringing to the world assessments, we have to ensure that it's data people can trust.
Yeah.
That they can trust this is the real deal. Hence the commitment we've made to the the rigor and the psychometric performance of the assessments. When we consider bringing them into the world and in the life of an organization, you are a beautiful model in our dialogue today that what your individual trust scale did, what my observation is, it lit a fire in you. You were excited.
Yeah.
I mean, you were like on fire. As I took that assessment, Michelle, I thought, oh, and this is what I saw. And then at one point in time, you said to me, well, I need to get better on this. I was only here and I want to be here. And I remember saying, Andy, wherever you are, it's brilliant. This is not about where are you the best. So we had a really wonderful conversation. So I'm going to share one quick story as quickly as I can.
Sure.
When I chatted a little bit ago about a business unit that was 1,500 people and then moved to 4,000 people, that business unit began 4 years earlier to that point in time. They were part of a very large global financial services organization. They were a newly developed business unit, new suites of products, a relative unknown in the marketplace, were there as a strategic growth initiative to this organization to expand into the marketplace. So unknown, not a whole lot of marketplace reputation. And at that point in time, not a top revenue generator and not a big profitable arm. So they brought in a new business unit CEO leader who had lots of experience in the industry. And his job was to build this business. Well, 3 months in, he began to make an observation that there was just sort of like really cool people and people that were really excited and jazzed about the products and, kind of a little on fire about, oh my God, let's go, let's go. We have this opportunity. We want to do our stuff. We want to grow in this market. Yet, what the CEO noticed was that there were lots of silos, and those silos had walls. And within each silo, people felt pretty good about themselves
Mm.
and pretty good about their view and their knowledge, but there was not the working across the enterprise. People stayed within boundaries rather than across boundaries. So this leader, we were very privileged, asked us to join him. We had worked with him in another organization, and he knew that what he had to do was bring this culture together. He knew what he needed to do was bring down these boundaries and begin to open up collaboration. So, long story short, the first order of business was a starting point assessment,
Mm.
an organizational trust assessment. Now, when an organization takes an assessment and leaders are there in a room and they're going to be the recipients of that assessment, before Dennis and I begin giving them data, we want to give them some foundational awareness and foundational understanding. So they got tuned into, the construct of trust building. They did some discovery and arrived at some meaning, and got to know these three dimensions of trust and their behaviors. So it's like a really half day, very highly dynamic period of time, and then they received their data. And we took them through a process of helping them arrive at insights from this data. But through that process of feedback, we help them go through their own process of discernment. So rather than Dennis and I saying, hey, gang, we're the experts here, and this is where we suggest you focus your developmental energy, we took them through their own process of discovery and support them to collaborate with one another. And the leadership team honed in on what they perceived to be the behaviors they thought would give them the strongest developmental edge.
Yeah.
Now, from that point forward, you know that people often wonder what's going to happen with an assessment. So the commitment the leadership team made was they were going to bring those results throughout the organization. Dennis and I did not bring those results ourselves. We tooled the leadership team up to bring those results, but we also tooled them up to begin teaching trust to their people.
Brilliant.
So over a progressive period of 3 years, Andy, what began as an assessment emerged as a trust building journey. And there were leadership trust assessments and team trust assessments, but the core ingredient that unfolded is leaders were supported to grow their own trustworthiness, yet they took what they learned and they brought it to their people. They were the teachers of trust building. They were the ones that brought insights and tools and skills and techniques to their people. So that's where transformation began to occur. The leaders didn't talk about trust. They didn't send people to a training program.
Yeah.
They lived it, they modeled it, they demonstrated. They opened the door for those conversations. They would bring the data into the room and let's talk about what we're seeing and what we're discovering. So trust became a part of the fabric of life within the organization. Over a 3-year period of time, they became an industry leader in the marketplace and the services and products they delivered. They became the fastest growing, most profitable business unit within their organization. Within a 4-year period of time, they bought 2 additional businesses. They began to grow. Growth is, revenues driving up, proportionally profitability is strengthening, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So trust building transformed the culture. The culture drove the growth of that business in unprecedented ways. So, a couple of key points from that story is we can never underestimate the power of what happens when leaders take their own growth in their hands and bring it to their people. And that aspect of you where it's like, yeah, you were so excited about the self-assessment and the conversation that unfolded, and we can imagine what happens, Andy, when that's going throughout an organization and everybody's supported to have those kinds of conversations. That's
Absolutely.
that's just one story that is a representative example of what happens.
I'm sure you have, and various little vignettes and stories are contained in the book as well to kind of accentuate some of the behaviors and
Yeah.
things that people are facing in. And I think, the great part of that story for me is the transference of ownership for this stuff going forward, rather than just going on a course or just the assessment thing on its own. Leadership, management have to buy into this stuff and make it an everyday part of work. Otherwise, it's another fad. It's not a habit. There's no real connection to it. Everybody knows when you're presenting somebody else's work or somebody else's kind of feelings, that ownership thing, I think, is an absolute massive multiplier when it comes to the effectiveness of these things. And anybody listening going, well, how? Well, the answers are all in the book, gang, really. So there's so much practical stuff in this book to go through. I can guarantee if you get hold of it, the answers are all there on all the pages about what you've got to do. Then it comes down to, well, I think the book will give you some awareness. You then have a choice to make about what you do with it. The definite thing here is around, you got to be intentional in those actions. And like Michelle and I were saying before, you got to then be consistent and make a habit out of it, right? That's got to be the thing that runs through this. So I will absolutely put a link to this book in the show notes, and you can see for yourselves, gang. Now, the only other thing I really want to talk about, and I say the only other thing, that's a lie. There are many other things I want to talk about, but I'm conscious you have lives other than sitting in chairs talking to me. Um, I would be ridiculous if I didn't talk to you about the sort of slightly darker side when it comes to trust and the previous works, particularly around healing and repairing trust when it goes wrong. And we won't be able to do it justice maybe in the time that we have left, but I'm really interested to understand from your perspective about what you see when trust breaks down and the kind of common pitfalls we fall into when we're trying to sort of either understand that or even repair it and do it badly. And what should we be doing? Are you able to give us like a highlighted view of the whole issue of repairing and healing trust when it's been broken?
Well, I'll take a crack at that, Andy.
You've been successful so far in taking cracks at stuff, Dennis. So you go ahead, my friend. I love it.
Well, thank you. First of all, I just want to tell the listening audience that this model, the 7 steps for healing to rebuild trust, didn't come from our academic experience. It actually came from very much a painful divorce long before I met Michelle, a very painful divorce that I went through over 40 years ago. And what I learned through my own coaching, that I was receiving, my own counseling, coaching, etc., that there are repeatable steps that I went through that just maybe they might have some value for others.
Mm-hmm.
And we, of course, have been applying this model and framework, not just at the individual level, but at the leader level, the team level, the whole organizational level. And what's absolutely critical, first and foremost, is that when trust breaks, it's viewed often as a loss. And people experience this disappointment, the hurt, the letdown, the anger, the withdrawal, the caution. And what we saw when people feel hurt, let down, disappointed, and betrayed is that it not only is somewhat of a loss, but people begin to question. They begin to not only just question others, but the biggest cost is that they begin to question themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Am I not the man I thought I was? Am I not the father, the husband, whatever, or the leader that I thought I was? And they literally begin to question. And so often leaders will tend to move too quickly and, well, let's put this behind us, but they need to honor people's feelings. So they need to first and foremost acknowledge what's so, what happened, and the impact on the people, and literally allow those feelings to surface, because people's feelings don't go away. And if they are not fully vetted, or they are not fully heard, or they are not fully listened to, they go underground. And that's when they become toxic. That's when they become lethal. That's when they become dangerous. Okay.
And
So,
victim. That's when the victim shows up,
Yeah.
Andy,
Yeah.
and can stay around for a really good long time, because when there is, as Dennis says, when trust has been broken, either, in a New York minute with something really big, but most time in organizational settings in particular, as well as our personal, it just unravels. And quite often, as you had mentioned a while ago, most of the time it's unintentional.
Hmm.
Yet we all feel it, So in the healing process, there is that importance of honoring ourselves. So we're observing and acknowledging what has happened and what was the impact, what was lost, what were the consequences, what did not occur that I thought would occur. It might have been a promotional opportunity. It might have been a relationship. It might have been the loss of an opportunity to receive some recognition because somebody stole my work and took credit for my efforts. And there's feelings and there's emotions that come along with that. But what's essential is that we use those feelings and emotions as a stepping stone.
Yeah.
So the first step of those 7 steps is observing and acknowledging what's happened, give ourselves permission to have those feelings and emotions, but none of us can go it alone. We need to give ourselves support and we need to support one another. We may take some responsibility to gain support from a colleague or a friend or a coach or our boss or a coworker. In the personal space of our life, it may be a family member, or we may turn to a therapist. But in a workplace, in a workplace environment, leaders really do need to ensure that they're supporting themselves to get support, and they're giving support to their people. Because what's essential to the process of healing and rebuilding trust is that 4th step where we reframe that experience. And that's where compassion is our friend. We always need to be willing to look at the bigger picture. What were the extenuating circumstances? What space might that person have been in that contributed to what I experienced? Not excusing, not blowing away, not sweeping it under the rug, but just looking at the reframing. What is here for me to learn? What is here for me to discover? And then step 5 is we need to take some responsibility. We may not have responsibility for what happened, but we have responsibility for how we're going to move forward. Being a
how
good
we choose
leader,
to respond. We may not have responsibility for what happened to us. We always, always, always have responsibility for how we choose to respond and what's mine to own and what's not mine to own. And so that's very critical right there, and that could be whether it be an apology, whether it be making amends where possible, clarifying what will change, what will stay the same, but demonstrating behavior over time, because from there, from step 5, taking responsibility, then we can forgive. First and foremost, we need to forgive ourselves. We need to forgive that we might have put ourselves in that situation, that betrayal or that breach or that breakdown or that circumstance happened in the first place. We may or may not immediately forgive the other persons that may have perpetrated against us, but we never, ever, ever want to forget the lessons learned. And then we are able to let go and move on. And letting go and move on, step 7 is not about condoning what happened, but at accepting it without blame.
I mean, it feels like another episode in itself, right, to give that proper justice. But just listening to the 7 steps, again, I think another full circle moment in this conversation, in that these things, I think, around trust can be taken for granted. We're humans. We understand how to communicate each other. This stuff should be easy and simple. It's not. It's complex. It's taken for granted, and something like the 7 steps, if you took all of those steps in isolation, oh yeah. But how intentional is the behavior that we take those steps and we take them in the right chronology and we do the diligence in each of those steps, and then we come out of that situation properly being able to move on and let go, other than having to go back round the circle again because we haven't covered it all off properly.
Totally, totally. Because while we mentioned steps in a linear fashion, they don't happen in a linear fashion. We may be thinking we're in step number 5, take responsibility, and all of a sudden a song may come on the radio and that triggers a whole set of feelings and emotions, etc. Or we may have to cycle through again and again, depending upon the immensity and the size of the breach or the breakdown or the betrayal. We may cycle through them numerous times, or we may slide back and forth and go around. So, and you might be in steps 1 and 2, and you're thinking you're in 4 and 5, and then you slide back to 1 and 2 again, acknowledging what happened and allowing those feelings to surface, because those feelings don't go away on their own. They need to be given voice, they need to be listened to, and they need to be let go of, but they don't happen automatically, and you don't do it alone.
And I think the thing that people need to remember in all this stuff is, I believe these are some fundamental building blocks to performance. This is why this stuff is not pink, fluffy, nice to have stuff. We have stuff to do. As people will say, we've got to get some shit done. And I think at the end of the day, this connection piece, the trust element, are fundamental elements to allowing real performance of individuals, performance of teams, and ultimately performance of organizations. I don't really think it can be underplayed. I really, really hope that I've given you a chance to do justice to your amazing work on trust today, in a very poor attempt to try and summarize some of the stuff we've talked about today. I think we've finally got to the bit in the show I like to call sticky notes, right? Which is, I'm going to ask the ridiculous task to sort of leave the audience with 3 real pearls of wisdom that we could fit on 3 little sticky notes and stick around our screens to remind ourselves about these things every day. So if we're thinking about building trust effectively, what between you would be those 3 sticky notes that you'd like to leave behind today?
I'd say the first one is trust begins with you. Trust begins with you. I can't emphasize enough how much I hope people will gain that. Trust begins with you. We all need it. We all want it. We all deserve it, and we can have it. It begins with us.
Love it.
Number 2, practice trust as a daily discipline, right? As 3 C's and the behaviors that come with the 3 dimensions. Every interaction is an opportunity to either build trust or to erode it. And so it's literally and figuratively a daily discipline.
And the final one.
When you experience trust being vulnerable, it's your opportunity to give that your attention to actually heal and repair it and rebuild it. And it's the greatest gift that we can actually give to ourselves, because none of us wants to be a victim, Andy. We all want to be healthy and whole.
Amen to that. Amen to that, my friends. Well, what do I say? I have thoroughly enjoyed meeting you both and getting the chance to talk to people who've written something that I've really connected with. And I thank you for being so very, very generous with your time and your insights. Before I let you go, where can people track you down? Where should people look for you?
Well, there's our website, www.reinatrustbuilding.com. And also for the assessment, which is in the book on the back page of the preface.
I've got the link. I will whack it in the show notes. No problem at all. That's going to be there. And people can get the book everywhere, right? I mean,
and we can give you an email also in the notes, Andy.
Perfect. And you're on LinkedIn, right? You're both on LinkedIn. People can track you down there. Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute joy and pleasure. And I wish you all the very, very best of stuff with your work. And I I desperately hope this is not our last conversation.
Oh, Andy, I will not let that happen because trust begins with me.
Absolutely. Well, and Andy, we've got at least 3 more books that were on the docket. So we will definitely be coming back to you.
I would love that. Absolutely
Andy,
love
it's been just a real joy. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful that we have connected and we shall continue. It's just the beginning.
that. I look forward to that. Thank you so much. Well, listen, you both take care. Thank you for coming on.
All right. God bless. Take care. Be safe. Be well.
Cheers. Well, okay, everyone. That was Dr. Michelle and Dr. Dennis Reina, and the book is The Art of Trust Building. If you'd like to find out anything about any of the topics that we've talked about today, please check out the show notes. So, that concludes today's episode. I hope you've enjoyed it, found it interesting, and heard something maybe that will help you become a stickier, more successful business from the inside going forwards. If you have, please like, comment and subscribe. It really helps. I'm Andy Gorham, and you've been listening to the Sticky from the Inside podcast. Until next time, thanks for listening.